Hey, what's up? My name is Norris and welcome back to another Sew Along. Now today we're going to be working on Mimi G Simplicity Pattern 9043. Now this is a pleated pants pattern that I designed with a lot of cool detail. Now if you're new to sewing or just need a refresher course, head over and watch our sewing basics video, link in the description box below. If you need more help or just want to learn to sew, head over to sewitacademy.com. All right, let's get started. Okay, once again, like I said, we're using Mimi G Simplicity Pattern 9043. Now, just to note, when you look at the pattern sizes, this is not the waist measurement, okay? You want to turn to the back and look at the flap of the envelope. You will see the waist. Now, whatever your waist measurement falls up under, that's what size you want to cut. And also, you can go down to finished garments and it'll give you the measurements for once you sew it up, give you an idea of what it's gonna fit like. And then also at the top you have fabric choices, denim, chinos, twills, linens, and a few extras. Also, you can look at the notions. You're going to need thread, of course, 1 7-inch zipper, and 4 5/8 of an inch buttons. All right. Now let's go through all the pattern pieces. Okay, first you're gonna cut out pattern piece number 7, which is your loop. You're gonna cut 2 of these. Now this is a really small pattern piece, so you wanna make sure you have number 7. And then pattern piece number 8, this is the welt. You wanna cut 2 of these and then 2 out of interfacing. Pattern piece number 5, which is your underlap, you're gonna cut 2 of fabric and 1 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 4 is your fly. You're gonna cut 1 of these of fabric and 1 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 10, you're gonna cut 1 of these out of fabric. Okay, pattern piece number 2 is your pocket facing. You wanna cut 2 of these out of lining. Okay, pattern piece number 3 is your front yoke and pocket. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric. Pattern piece number 11 is your waistband. You want to cut 4 of these out of fabric and also 4 of these out of interfacing. But if you're using really heavy fabric, you might be using like a heavy wool. If you do that, you only need to cut 2 of these out of interfacing. Pattern piece number 9 is your back pocket. Now, you can cut 2 of these out of your fabric. But if you don't want your pocket bag really bulky, you can cut 2 of these out of interfacing instead of your fabric. But if you do that, you're gonna have to create a facing piece that goes on the back bottom of your lining piece. I'm gonna show you how to do that and create that piece a little bit later. Okay, we have pattern piece number 1, which is your front piece. You want to cut 2 of these out of your fabric. And then last but not least, we have pattern piece number 6, and this is your back. You want to cut 2 of these out of your fabric as well. Okay, once you have all your fabric cut out, you have your lining and all of your proper pieces interfaced, your 7-inch zipper and your 4 5/8 of an inch buttons, we can begin sewing. Okay, so unlike the instructions in the envelope, we're going to start on our back instead of our front. This is because I want to go ahead and let you do your welt pockets and get that out of the way because that's probably the most difficult step in this process. So before I get started, remember when I told you that you can cut your back pocket piece out of fabric or out of lining? Now, if you cut out a lining, you're gonna need to create a facing piece just like this. Basically what I did was I measured from the bottom of the pattern piece up 3 inches. And I just drew a line across. And I just took that over to my paper to create a pattern piece. And it basically looks just like this. Now, what I do is I'm going to take one end of this, turn under, and give it a good press a 1/2 inch up. Okay, once you press up a 1/2 inch on one of the long ends, you want to take your back pocket piece. Let's say this is the front. You want to turn this up like that take this, turn it upside down, wrong sides facing, and you want to match up the ends of the bottom and pin it. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over, and the back is going to look like this. What you're going to do now is head over to the machine, and you're just going to add stitch it right there on the fold all the way across. And once you do that, you just want to base the side across the bottom and then up the other side, and then we're going to continue. Okay, now when I come to the machine, as you can see, this is the right side. I turn it over to the bottom on the back. I have it edge stitched and I have it based on the sides and on the bottom. Now I'm going to put this to the side for just a moment, and we're going to work just on our back piece. You can see right here that we have a dart. So I want you to take your dart and you want to pin the bottom first. Pin through one line on one side and make sure the pin is coming through the other side. That's how you get a straight dart. And do the same thing all the way up. Okay, now that we have this pin, we're going to go to machine and we're going to stitch starting from the top and down to our marking. Okay, starting from the top, we're going to back stitch at the beginning, but not at the end. Okay, so when we get to the bottom, we're going to stitch right till we get to that marking, and we're going to stitch off the garment. Raise your needle, pull your thread, and then now we're just going to tie off the end. Now after you make a few more knots, you're done. Okay, now that we're back from the machine, as you can see, you have a nice dart on this side, and I went ahead and I pressed the dart towards the back seam. And then across the top, I went ahead and basted it. That's so my waist won't stretch at all, okay? Now that we have the dart out the way, I'm gonna move this to the side for just a second, and we're gonna work on our loop. Okay, now for our loop, we're basically just going to fold in both of the ends to the center. And we're gonna give that a good press. And then after you do that, you're gonna fold all of that in half like this. And then you're gonna take it over to your sewing machine and you're going to egg stitch that open end close. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so after you edge stitch the side that was open, you wanna go ahead and turn over both sides just like this, creating a little triangle at the end. And you want to give it a good press at your pressing table. And then I like to take a pin and just pin them together. So once you have it pinned, I'm going to turn it over and you see the bottom of this triangle. We're going to stitch it right across the bottom, just the whole shape. Okay, like I said, we're going to stitch right across the bottom of that triangle. Put your needle down. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. All right, so after we do that, you want to take your ruler or a seam gauge, and we're going to measure down 3/4 of an inch, which put it right there where my pin is. And we're going to stitch across there. Back to the end. That creates a little opening here for our button. Okay, so now if you haven't already, you want to go ahead and connect the dots here. You want to just draw a line for the top and also the bottom. And then you want to take your loop and you want the bottom to be touching the bottom line, and you just place it right there in the center where the dart is and pin it. All right, so you want to head to your machine now, and you want to just stitch starting at this dot all the way across, stitch through your loop, and then end up at your other dot. And we're only doing the top. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that we stitch this down, you want to take your scissors and trim down the loop to 1/4 inch. Just like that. Once we do that, we're going to take our welt piece and we're going to fold it in half, wrong sides touching, just like this, and give it a good press. All right, so I folded in half and gave it a good press. And now from the raw edge here, I went ahead and measured 3/8 of an inch away from there, and I created a guideline. So now you want to take your back piece and you want to line that guideline up with the line that's on your pants. Okay, just like that. And then now you're going to take your pocket bag, and remember, if you're doing a lining, you're going to place it just like this with the back bottom with the facing on it. So now take this and line it up with the edge lined up perfect with the edge of the welt. Now, this is going to be a little bit different from what you see in the directions, but I find this a little bit easier for me, so hopefully you like it too. Then we're just basically going to line it up and give it a good pin. So you want to pin right there where the end dot is and turn it under to make sure you're at that dot. And if you're at that dot, pin it all the way through. And we're going to do that all the way across. Now that we have it all pinned, we're going to stitch starting at one dot all the way across onto the other dot through all thicknesses. And we're doing the top line only, not the bottom. Okay, first I'm going to put my needle right through that dot. Now I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. Take your time, make sure you don't shift on you. Okay, now that we have the welt sandwiched in between the pocket bag and your back piece, you want to fold back your welt in your pocket bag. And we're just going to do a little cut right in the center. And once you do that, you want to go ahead and continue cutting towards one direction. It's right in the center. And once you get 5/8 of an inch away from the dot, you want to cut diagonally towards your dot in one end, in one corner. Okay. And then in the other direction. Just like that, it's going to create a little triangle here in the center. And the same exact thing in the other direction. Okay, so once you do that, you want to go ahead and tuck all of this to the inside. Put your welt in there too. And this right here is the beginning of how you're forming your welt, as you can see. And now you can just give this a good press. Okay, now that we have this pressed, we want to turn this over to the other side, and this is what it looks like. You have your triangles going out that way, and now you want to bring the bottom of your bag up and you want to turn up the top seam allowance so they can meet right sides facing. And we're going to pin. Pin in the center. So now I like to work from this side so I can see the top. So you want to make sure the corner land flat, and you just pin it right there where that stitching, pre-existing stitching is. Okay, you want to do the other side the same way. Just want to make sure it's laying flat at the ends, because this is what's going to make your welt look nice. Okay, just like that. So now we're going to go to machine. We're going to start right there at the corner, all the way across, and then end right there at the other corner. And we're going to do that using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, in order to get your pin in the right place, you just want to place it down in that corner. We're going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. And once again, we're using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we're back from the machine. We went ahead and stitched across the top. Now I'm going to turn this over and show you how to get your welt neat. Now this right here is very important. So now we're going to take your welt and take that fold line all the way up to the top, just like that. Just lining it up basically, and we're going to pin it. We just pin that in place. And we'll do the same thing to the corners. Pin it in place. And then the same thing to this other corner. Okay, so basically it looks just like this, lined up exactly how it's supposed to look. So now you want to take one end, fold it back, and pull that triangle flat. It has a nice clean finish. All right, and then the same thing on the other side. You want to pull that flat, that triangle flat, and it has a nice finish on the other side. Now we're going to head over to the machine and we're going to do one end at a time. We're going to fold back our back piece, and with 5/8 of an inch we're going to stitch across the top and go all the way to the bottom. Then same thing to the other side. We're going to pull this, make sure it's laying flat, 5/8 of an inch. We're going to stitch across. Very important. Sometimes the way you put this together is not going to end up to be 5/8 of an inch across the top. You're going to have to just see where the end of your triangle is, and that's your seam allowance across the top. Now once you go across your triangle and have it secured, you can merge into 5/8 of an inch all the way down. Okay, starting on one side, I'm only working on my pocket bag and my triangle. So like I said, you want to pull that triangle flat, make sure it's down, and put your pin right where the edge of that triangle is on the side. This may or may not be 5/8 of an inch, depending on how your welt came out. So we want to back stitch at the beginning and also the end. Just do it a few times across that triangle, and then continue down with 5/8 of an inch. So now when I flip over, it's nice and secured on one side. So now let's do the other side. This time we're going to start at the bottom, back to the beginning, also at the end. Okay, now before we approach our triangle, once again, this may or may not be 5/8 of an inch for you up here, depending on how your triangles came out. For me, I would say it's a little less than 5/8 of an inch, but I'll see, because you want to get it just at the bottom of the triangle. So you have to gradually sew to meet it, you have to do that. You want to go over it a few times. Okay, so I'm back from the machine, and as you can see, I have a nice finished welt. And I went ahead and did a little extra zigzag stitch right here on the side, just to give it a little bit more secure, and also right here. Now this right here is also a good trick if your welts didn't come out perfect. You can zigzag, do a narrow zigzag up and down to secure those ends. I just like it because it makes it a little bit more secure. But typically, if I want them to be really formal, I don't do it. But I think I want them a little bit more of a casual look, so I did the zigzags. And then look across the bottom, I went ahead and serged across the sides and then across the top. That's optional. You don't have to serge it if you don't have a serger. And as you can see, my triangles on both ends are nice and secured. Last thing you have to do is just open up your welt pocket, sew on your button, and then just button it through your loop. Now that we have one welt done, you want to do your other welt the same way. And now we're going to move along to the front. Okay, now for the front. Before we do anything, we're going to go ahead and prep. You want to do a basting stitch about a 1/2 inch across the top on both sides. And then also you want to do a basting stitch along only the left side. It's going to be on the right here, but if you're wearing them, this is your left side, right side's facing you. You want to do a basting along your stitching line right here. Now once you do that, we're going to continue working. Okay, so now we're going to take our yoke and also our pocket bag, and we're right sides facing. You're going to take that and just lay it over the top, just like this. Make sure that your notches at the bottom matches up. Pin there. Pin along the edge of your pocket bag. Okay, so now we're going to head to the machine, and we're going to start right here at the top of the pocket bag in the yoke. We're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, all the way here, and we're going to end up right here and stop. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so before we head to the machine, we're going to go ahead and mark out your 5/8 of an inch right here, because you won't be able to see your seam allowance because you have this fabric right here in the waist. So we're going to mark it out right here just so we can stay within our seam allowance. Okay. So we have the 5/8 of an inch that we can see. So once you get right here towards the bottom, you don't have to mark here because you can see it across the bottom. Okay, now that I have it stitched around the bottom and then along this side here, I went ahead and serged across the bottom and then around this curve and then right here, just so it can look nice on the inside of my garment. All right, so after I do that, you want to turn it up around like that, pin this part back, just the yoke. I'm only pinning the yoke back. And then now I'm going to grab one of my front pieces, and now this is my right side here, and then with right side's facing, I'm going to turn my pocket bag over to the front onto the front piece just like this, and I'm going to pin. And I'm only pinning my pocket bag to my front piece. Make sure you match your notches. Okay, really easy. Head over to the machine and you're going to stitch this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that I have this stitch down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, now I'm going to trim down my seam to about 3/8 of an inch. And now I'm going to head over to the machine and we're going to do an understitch. Now for the understitch, I have my seam allowance facing towards my pocket bag. So my seam allowance underneath is on this side. So now I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to understitch. So I'm going to start here at the top and I'm going to edge stitch close to the edge all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle down right there on the edge on my pocket bag side. And remember, you want to put your seam allowance on this side to the left, the side where your pocket bag is. And now we're going to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. Okay, now that I understitch right here on my pocket bag, I want to take my pin out of my yoke. And then now I'm just going to fold this right there and then open this up. And basically you'll see the front take shape. But before we continue, you want to go ahead and fold this, give it a good press. We understitch so the pocket bag won't be seen and it'll roll into the inside. And once again, just move that yoke out the way. Give that a good press. And then you want to go to your sewing machine and you're going to top stitch starting at the bottom using a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way up. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that I'm back from the machine and I have my top stitching on my opening right here where my pocket is, we're going to work on our pleat. Now, we're going to take the pocket bag and the yoke and put it all to the side for just a moment. And now you have your front piece right here. Now, if you turn to the back, you have 2 markings. You want to go ahead and bring those markings together. And you want to pin. And then also at the other dot. Put it through one dot and making sure it goes on the other dot on the other side, just like that. Okay. So now we're going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to start at the top and we're going to stitch down until we get to the second dot. And then you want to backstitch and cut your thread. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, starting at the top, I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and also at the end. Okay, now that we have the pleat done just like that, we're going to face the wrong side up and we're just going to flatten the back of the pleat just like this and give it a good press. And we're going to base it across the top. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so now that I gave this a good press, you can see that my pleat is pressed flat. I went ahead and based across the top. And now I'm going to take my yoke and just throw it on there like that and turn it around to this side. Line up my side here and pin. And then you want to make sure that the top is laying flat. You have a notch here and a notch here on your front. Match those up as long as it's flat. And then you just want to pin. Okay. Now you can see that the pleat looks really nice right here, and all of this is lined up on one side. Now last thing you want to do right now before we continue is you just want to baste the side together and then baste the front starting right here at the opening of the pocket across the top. Baste that down. Okay, now you want to grab your other front and do it the same exact way we did this one. You want to make sure you do your yoke, your pocket bag, your top stitching, your pleat, and then also baste the side down and then baste across the top. Okay, as you can see, I got both of my front pieces finished. If you look at my right side, which is on the left, I went ahead and serged the inside and all the way down to the hem and then the outseam on this side. Now for the left side, which is on the right, I did the outseam with a serge. I did the hem all the way up to the crotch with the serge. But then right here on the inside, I only serge an inch under the notch right there. So I didn't go all the way up because we're gonna be folding this a little bit later. So that's what I did to prep my front pieces. And then now I'm going to go ahead and turn them right sides facing. Pin at my markings. And there's a notch right here that's important that you need to match up. Make sure that it matches up even on both sides. Okay, so now we're going to stitch starting at our notch, which is right here. Starting at our notch all the way up to our large dot, which is right here. You're only going to stitch right there. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that I'm back from the machine, you can see I have my stitching line right here. Working on the left side, which is the side with the fly stitching line right here. I want to turn it on this side. Now at that dot, I'm going to snip right into it until I get to my dot, but not cutting in my thread. Okay, now after you cut into your left side where that big dot is, you want to go ahead and grab your fly front. Now I went ahead and serge around the curve and up my fly on this end right here. If you don't have a serger, you can just fold in a 1/2 inch and press it. My end is finished with a serge stitch, so I don't have to fold it under. So now we're going to turn this to the front like this, and this is our left side. Now we're going to take this and turn it right sides facing. And we're going to pin. It should be 2 notches that you match up. So now we're going to start at the bottom right here and stitch all the way up using 5/8 of a net seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that we stitched this down using 5/8 of a net seam allowance, we're going to trim this down to about 1/4 inch. Now with the seam allowance facing the opposite way of your front piece, you want to go ahead and fold your fly down like this. And as you can see, the seam allowance underneath is facing the fly. And now we're going to do understitching one more time. So let me turn it this way and we're going to add stitch on the fly side all the way down until we get to the bottom. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that I understitch right here on the fly side, I went ahead and turned under and gave it a good press. And then open it back up. And now we're going to put our zipper on. So I turned my zipper wrong side up, and you want to measure from the top of your zipper pull 5/8 of an inch, and then mark where the 5/8 of an inch is on the top, just so you can know where your seam allowance is. So now, with your zipper facing down, you're going to place this part of your zipper on the right along the seam line right here, just like that. Now you want to make sure your seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, matches up. And you can cheat it, you can slide it down maybe another 1/8 of an inch just to be safe and not have your zipper get caught up into your seam on your waistband. So just like that. And then now I'm going to pin. Okay, so this is super easy. We're going to head to the machine. You're going to edge stitch this zipper pull on the left side all the way down, and then a 1/4 inch away from that stitch, you want to stitch to the right of it all the way down again. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm starting from the bottom. Okay, so when we get here, you want to pull the zipper down a little bit so we can finish up the end. Okay. So slide over a 1/4 inch towards the inside, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Okay, now we're back from the machine. We have our 2 stitches right here on our left side, which is right here on my right. And then on the right side, which is here on my left, you're just going to turn under 3/8 of an inch, just like I did right here. So just take your seam gauge and make sure it's 3/8 of an inch. And then once you do that, you're just going to open your zipper up, and we're going to line this up and pin. Okay, so now we're going to head over to the machine, and you're just going to baste this down right there on the edge of that fold. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that we based this side here down, we're going to pull the zipper up just to make sure it's even and that the fly is flat. All right. And now we're going to put this to the side for just a moment. Now grab your underlap. One should be interface and the other one is not interface. So right sides together. Okay, so once you have them right sides facing, we're going to stitch this down on this curved side using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so I went ahead and trimmed my seams, turned it to the right side, and I gave it a good press. Then I went ahead and basted along this side and also across the top. And also, just to have a clean finish on the inside, I went ahead and serged just this side right here. So now I'm going to grab my front piece, and then I'm going to overlap from my seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch. So I should have 5/8 of an inch of my underlap underneath my front piece, and then I'm going to pin. Okay, so now you're basically going to do the exact same thing. You're going to top stitch right here. This time you're not going to base, you're going to do an actual stitch. So stitch over your basing stitch all the way down till you get to the bottom. It might be a little difficult if your zipper pull is in the way, so you might want to go ahead and zip it as far down as you can. And then when you get to the bottom, you might have to switch to a zipper foot just so you can get to the corner. So do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, now that we're back from the machine, this right here is stitched down nice, as you can see, just like that. So we zip it all the way up. And now I'm going to turn it to the wrong side. So right now I'm going to turn back my underlap onto my right side, and I'm going to pin it just to keep it out the way. And now I'm going to turn it right back around. Okay, so now once I turn it around, we have the underlap pinned back onto this side here. I'm going to take pins and I'm going to pin my fly to my front piece just a few times. Okay, so now I'm going to head to the machine and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to stitch all the way up following my stitching guide all the way up to the top. Put my needle down right there at the beginning of my stitching guide all the way up. Back to the beginning, also at the end. Take your time. Okay, so once we went ahead and stitch along our stitching line here on this side, we're going to go ahead and unpin the underlap underneath. Okay, so before moving along, you want to go ahead and go to the machine and you want to tack down the center right here. So just basically just take a narrow zigzag stitch and go up and down a little bit to secure right there where that is. Okay, so now moving along, we're going to go ahead and take one of your back pieces and lay them on one side of your front piece. Just going to take one of mine and right side is facing. Just want to lay it over the top. Grab some pins and we're going to pin, starting with the outseam first, all the way down. There's a notch right here you need to match up. Okay, so once we do the outseam, you want to go ahead and do the inseam. There's a notch right here that you match up. And if you think it's pulling a little bit, it's perfectly normal. That's how the inseam is supposed to be, just so it could go up your leg. Now right here where the crotch is, you want to match that up. There's a marking right there. Okay. What I would suggest, you do a basting stitch 5/8 of an inch here, and then a basting stitch 5/8 of an inch here. Try it on first, see how it fits. If you like it, go ahead and do a permanent stitch for your inseam and for your outseam. If it's not a good fit and you need to taper it in a bit more, this is the time for you to do that. If you need to take in more, just pinch out one side and divide it up on both sides and evenly taper it down, okay? So once you get the fit of one side, you want to mark your adjustments, or if you have any adjustments, and do the other side the same exact way. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that we have your outseam and your inseam done, it should look like this. Hopefully you tried them on and they have a nice fit. We still have the back open and also underneath the crotch right here. Normally I don't usually put belt loops on my dress pants, but I will show you how to do them now. Now we're going to put this to the side and we're going to grab our carrier. All right, your carrier is pretty simple. Basically, we're just going to take the ends and fold them in like that. And then we're going to fold that one more time in half, just like this. Then give it a good press. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so once you fold it, you're going to go ahead and edge stitch it closed on one end and then edge stitch the folded edge all the way down. And then next, we're going to measure out 6 3.5-inch belt loops. So I'll do the first one. I can just use that one to make the rest. Okay, now that we have our 6 belt loops, we're going to go ahead and place them onto our pants. Now there are 6 markings at the waist of your pants. You want to go ahead and place them Okay, so now we're going to go to the machine and you're going to tack each one down 5/8 of an inch. And then after you do that, you want to drop 3/8 of an inch below where you tacked it at, and you want to stitch it down at that 3/8 of an inch marking. Okay, so just using the basting stitch, I'm going to tack my first one down, and then with a regular stitch, I'm going to slide up. You're just going to slide up 3/8 of an inch, and then you're going to tack down using a regular stitch. Okay, so I have my 5/8 of an inch tacked down right here, and then I dropped down 3/8 of an inch and did a tack down, but a permanent one. Do that to all the rest of your belt loops. Okay, now that we have our belt loops tacked on, we're going to apply our waistband. So we're just going to unzip a bit like that. You want to grab your waistband, and it should have a curve like this. And if you look at one end, you have notches here, and you have a notch here at the end. So you want to go ahead and align your notch like that. And when you pin the end here on your underlap, it should be 5/8 of an inch longer. Now you want to go ahead and go to your machine, and you're going to stitch all the way across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're working on our right side. Our left side is going to be a little bit different because we have the extending waistband. Okay, now that we have one side stitched down, we're going to do the left side now. So find your notches. Your notch is going to be right here on your other side. So you're going to stitch it there. Pin. Alright, so your left side is going to extend just like this. So now you're just going to start here and stitch all the way till you get to the back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so now that my waistband is stitched on both sides, I went ahead and took my remaining waistband and turned up the seam allowance and gave it a good press. And the part that I folded is the unnotched part. Alright, so go ahead and line it up just like this. And we're going to pin it all the way across. Okay, so right here where we get to the belt loops, you have two options. You could turn under 3/8 of an inch, and after we stitch this down and turn it around, you could stitch it onto the outside of your waistband. But I want to catch mine within the seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it up just like that. But as you see, it's not going to reach the edge, but I'm going to encase it anyway because my seam allowance doesn't change. So once I get that within the seam, I'm going to pin. Okay, now I'm going to start at the end and I'm going to stitch all the way until I get here, and I'm going to pivot 5/8 of an inch away from the edge and then stitch all the way down to the bottom. Okay, now I have it stitched down on this side. Now I'm going to trim the corner, my seam allowance a little. And point out your corners. Now we're going to give this a good press. And before we finish it up, we're going to work on the other side. Okay, so for the left side, it's going to be a little different. I went ahead and pressed up my hem allowance here. But right here, I left it open. And I turned down the seam allowance in the back. So I wanted to line this up, and I pinned all the way around and then across the top. So I'm going to head to the machine and I'm going to start stitching here, go up, pivot, and then all the way across the top. Put my needle in, and with 5/8 of an inch, I'm going to back to the beginning and also at the end. Pivot. Pivot again. And then now you're going to continue all the way down until you get to the end. Okay, on this side right here, I pressed and I pinned just the front down. You can see I pinned through the seam allowance to catch the waistband on the other side. I didn't do it all the way down because the back needs to stay open for when I close in my back seam. So now I'm going to work on the left side of my waistband. I'll go ahead and trim my corners first. And then now we're going to turn this right side out and then point out our corners. This is going to give us that extended waistband. Okay. And then we just tuck that seam allowance in there just like that. And there you go. So after I get it at a good press, that I lay flat. And also remember, you don't have to put your belt loops in your seam. You can just wait until you stitch the seam and then just tack them down on top of your waistband. And then once you zip that up, you'll see that it extends just like this. The only thing you have to do to finish up is to do your buttonhole here, your buttonhole here, and then next you're going to take one of your pant legs and turn it wrong side out. And then you're going to take your other pant leg and stick it right inside. This is basically right sides touching. Okay, so once you got it tucked in good, you want to go ahead and open up your seam allowance. Make sure that your seams are matching, and you're going to pin. So the seam on the back starts at 1 inch and it grades into 5/8 of an inch down here. Match up your 3 notches in the back. Okay, and now we have the crotch. Now we're going to start at 1 inch here, and we're going to stitch and just follow your guide. If you didn't mark the stitching line to the back, you want to go ahead and grab your back piece and put that marking down. And then it's going to come into 5/8 of an inch here. And then we're going to finish up right here. Okay, now we're going to back stitch at the beginning and also at the end. You want to make sure the bottom seam here is facing up. Back stitch. Now this closes out the entire seam here. Okay, now we're going to take your pant leg out, the other one. Now if I turn it around to the back, my entire back is closed down just like this. All my seams are lined up, and all we have to do now is continue pinning our waistband down. So we basically just going to take a pin and put it right in the middle of that seam, catching the waistband on the inside. And we're going to do that all the way around. And then once we do that, we're going to go to the machine and we're going to stitch in the ditch. And that's going to close the waistband out. And the same for this side too. You can go all the way around and stitch in the ditch there. For your seam in the middle, you want to go ahead and press that. And then turn under your seam allowance. And that's how it's going to look on the inside. Once again, you want to pin it in the seam where it's catching right here. The only thing left to do after you stitch in the ditch to encase your waistband underneath, you want to do your buttonhole right here on the inside, and then your buttonhole right here on the extended waistband. And then last but not least, you want to turn under where your hem is, give it a good press. I would recommend a hand stitch if it's a pair of slacks. But if it's denim or something real casual like chinos, you can top stitch it if you want to. Okay, now after you do all that, you're all done. All right, congratulations, you're all done. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment below and also follow me on Instagram at Norris Danta. And until next time, see you next video.